Okay, great. Hi, welcome to today's session on Everyone Can Create. If you haven't joined any of these sessions before, my name's Matt. I am Senior Lecturer at the University of South Wales. I'm also a Professional Learning Specialist with Apple, and I'm doing these webinars really just to upskill people. It keeps me busy as well, which is good at this point, gives me something to focus on. And just to spread some of the opportunities that you can have with Apple technology. I think from what I've seen when I visit schools, etc., lots of people have Apple technology. They'll have an iPad, have an iPhone, but don't always know the extent of the things that you can do with the devices. So that was the idea of putting on some webinars. So today's session then is all about creation. So Apple have a fantastic curriculum created by educators all around Create, and we're going to have a look at some of the activities from that today. Feel free to play along if you've got another device. If you're doing this on a laptop and you've got an iPad handy, you can play along. If not, the video's there that you can watch as many times as you want, or use with any of your students going forward. So, like I said, creativity comes in many forms. Okay, so even beyond the four things that are on the screen here, we can be creative in lots of ways. I'm sure people are being very creative with their time at the moment because we are all housebound, and there's only limited things that you can do. I've seen lots of people being very creative in what they do online, etc. But we're going to focus specifically on what we can do with our device around creativity, and we're going to look specifically today at photography, video, music, and drawing. And I've tried to highlight there again some of the apps that we'll be focusing on today. The key thing to kind of point out here is you can be creative in any apps, but I can't show you a million different apps to use. I'm just going to keep to the basics, the things that are free, the things that come on your device when you take it out of the box. And really, today's session is about having a bit of fun. I'm going to highlight it now, a cringeworthy moment later on when I do some of the music bit, not because I'm singing or playing music, but I'm going to have to record my voice. So I've pre-recorded that to hopefully spare my blushes a little bit later. Okay, so we can get started with photo. Children, adults, lots of people taking photos. Again, I've seen lots and lots of lovely photos going around social media at the moment where people are kind of, documenting what life is like in lockdown and those sorts of things. So let's have a look at what we can do in photos to be even more creative with what we're doing. So we're going to have a look at how we can take images and remix them into something new, how we can take those photos from within Keynote itself, which saves a step, certainly for younger learners. If you can keep them within one app when they're first learning about things, it means they're not going to get lost. We're going to have a look at Instant Alpha because it's a great way for us to play around with things. And we'll talk about frames and then this idea of building collages. The image on your screen at the moment is a page from the Apple the Apple Everyone Can Create guides. And that's just one of the ideas that you can do. I think it's a fantastic idea of, remixing your face. All of those pictures are of the same child, but they've taken them with different, different filters. So you get the black and white. One might be zoomed in. It might have a different, color frame on it, different frames, borders, etc. So lots of things that you can do. I'm sure as educators you can come up with lots of ideas. So let's jump into photos then. So I'm going to start here with a blank page on my Keynote, and I'm going to remix a picture, and I'm going to go through some of the processes. Now, I've captured some of these pictures in advance only for the purposes of doing a webinar, but I will also show you where you can add in your pictures live as well. So I'm going to tap on the plus button at the top, and go to photo or video, and then go to my design images, because if you've been on any of the sessions before, I like to try to file things away so that I can find them easier later on. And I found this picture here. I went on to Pixabay, which is a great free video download place. They're royalty free, that you're able to use these pictures. So it's a great source. I try to highlight this away from things like Google Images, just because of the copyright issues, etc. So if we try to instill this idea of going to sources of pictures, videos, etc., which are royalty free, it means that if we're doing anything like this and we want to share it publicly, we know that we're not going to infringe on copyright issues. So Pixabay and Unsplash is another really, really good one. So this is my start picture, and I think that's great. I would have to jump into that water, right? You know, right now I could imagine being in this place, and what would I do if I was there? Jump into the water. So we're going to start to play around with that kind of notion. Now, if I was in a position where I could take a photo live at the moment and take a photo of myself or take a photo of my son, then I would do that by just opening the camera. So I can just tap on camera. I've then got the camera open on my device. Here we go. That's my desk at the moment. But I'm not going to do that because I haven't actually got anyone in the room, and I'm not taking a photo of myself at the moment. My hair is like 5 weeks gone past being cut, so I'm hiding behind my screen. But if I was going to take a photo, it might look something like this, right? So this is I've got a sheet of green fabric. So I took a photo of my son earlier and asked him to just jump into different positions. So now I've got this photo, and I want to make it look like he's jumping into the water, right? Because that's the idea. Like, we're going to play around with a bit of a collage here. We're going to make something new with some photos. So within this picture, a couple of things that I can do to just help me out. It doesn't look great like this, right? It's obvious that he's not in the picture. He's on a green background. So I'm going to take that image, tap on the paintbrush at the top, and then tap on image. So I've got image there as a selection. I'm going to choose instant alpha. Now, all you need to do with instant alpha is tap the screen and slowly drag down until you're getting rid of the color you want to get rid of. Now, in this case, there's a few different shades of green. So if I go all the way down, I'm actually going to get rid of the green, but also parts of my sun as well, which I don't want to do. So I'm going to go back up. And I think, okay, at that point now I can let go, and you can see that's got rid of that bit of green. Now I'm going to tap somewhere else and choose a different part of the picture to get rid of the green. And you can just kind of build this over time, like a little bit at a time. I don't want to go to his shorts, so select that bit. And depending on the background you've got, this can be really, really quick to achieve, or it can take a little bit more patience. But you get the idea. I can just get rid of those bits. Just leaving my son in the image. When I tap done, I'm left with that picture of my son. Now I'm just going to crop that image now. I don't need all of that background. Tap done. And now I've got this picture of my son where I can make it look like he's just jumped off of that pier, just about to land in the water. And really, it's as simple as that, right? It's just a case of just merging pictures together and using this idea of instant alpha in order to add some elements in. Now, it's a nice day in this picture, but I can't really tell if it's sunny or not sunny. There's a bit of haze on the horizon. So I'm going to actually just enhance this again. And this is another really, really simple way of doing this. I'm just going to go, and this time I'm just going to search for a picture of the sun. And go to images. And I know I've just said, you wouldn't do it this way, but I just wanted to show an alternative way of doing it. And there's lots of pictures here of the sun that I could use. Some of them look a little bit scarier than others, like they're just about to explode. I'm just going to take this picture, this one here, the clip art type picture. Now, I've shown this again in previous sessions, how you can quickly move things around. If I tap and hold the image so I can move it, you can see I've now got control of it. If I close my screen and open Keynote, I can drop that directly into Keynote. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it, if I open Safari and have it as split screen, I can also do the same thing, drag and drop. So drag it, so I've selected that image, take it across and drop. Okay, so there's two ways that you can get images from one app into another. Now I'm just going to delete one of those because I don't want two suns. We've got the same issue with this picture now, okay? So I've got a picture, but it's got a white background. And again, I'm just going to do the instant alpha thing just to highlight how we do it. So select the picture, make sure I've got the blue dots around it. Tap on the paintbrush, tap on instant alpha, and then just select parts of that picture that I want to get rid of. You see how easy it is when you have a solid background color. And now I have the sun, which you can see has got no background. And place that up in the sky and make it look a little bit more summery. And this is the whole idea about, like, what can you do with photos to mash them into something new? Okay, you could be on the surface of a planet, and then you could end up adding in additional elements on top. One thing that my son's done this week, which I thought was quite imaginative, was he was mashing up his own Star Wars characters. So he took lots and lots of pictures of Star Wars characters and would just focus on someone's head and then someone's arm and someone's body and someone's leg. And and then he would merge all of those things together to make a new character in Star Wars. So lots and lots of ways that you can be creative. It's really, really simple, but that is just one way that you can use photography to create something new. And again, I'm not showing you this from a subject-specific thing. We could talk about this being art, but this could be history. You could place people in different historical situations and talk about things. There's lots and lots of ideas that I'm sure as educators you come up with. So again, like if there's any questions, feel free to jump them in, but I think that's pretty much covered it for photos. This process is really, really simple. So we'll move on to our next section. So we've covered photography. We're going to move on to drawing. Now we've looked at sketch notes in other sessions, and if you haven't been in those sessions, the links will be sent out to the contact list that we've had for the webinars. And you can look at sketchnoting as an option, but we're going to have a look at drawing within Keynote in a slightly different way. So we're going to look at it in terms of representing data. Now, we know that in schools, like maths is a bit of a Marmite subject. Some people love it, some people hate it. What we're going to look at here is how you can integrate some different kind of skill sets to engage people into the subject that might not ordinarily love things like spreadsheets, right? I am one of those people who look at a spreadsheet and just see mess. Like, it doesn't inspire me. I can't work it out. So this is the idea of using infographics as a way to represent the data, to personalize what you're doing, to make it something more about you and less about the numbers on the screen. So I've taken a really, really rough basic example here of what children might do in a school setting. Okay, so a traffic survey, and you can imagine the children standing out on the road and watching cars go by, and just noting down, how many cars went past, how many buses went past, bikes, lorries, etc. And they might have a lot more data than this, but I'm just going to work off some basic data, which, by the way, isn't real. Like, there's not that many cars out and about at the moment. I'm seeing a lot more bikes than I've seen lorries at the moment. But anyway, so that's our basic data. That doesn't inspire anyone. That's just numbers on a page. What does it really mean? So what we're going to look at is how we can take that data and turn it into something else. Okay, so how could I represent the number of cars? Well, the first thing I could do is if I open up my drawing tools, again, I'll just go through the process. I've got an Apple Pencil. If I tap the screen, I get instant access to my drawing tools. If you're using another stylus, tap on the plus, tap on drawing, and you'll have your drawing tools along the bottom. So first thing I need to do is I just need to draw a car. So I'm just going to very roughly draw something that would represent a car. And again, this is that personalized approach. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's my interpretation of a car, he says, just in case you didn't realize it was a car. And I'm just going to use some of the other tools just to color it in, make it look a little bit nicer. There we go. Maybe he's going to have like windows. There we go. So there's my car. Okay. Tap on the select tool, choose it, tap resize. I can move that to somewhere on my screen, and then I'm going to carry on. So the next thing I'm going to do is a bus. Just whilst I'm doodling, I will admit I did get a GCSE in art, which is why my drawings are so brilliant. Just as well I can't hear your microphones because you just all laugh at that comment. Right. So just quickly go through this and I'll make my bus a different colour just so it stands out. Again, just select that, tap resize just so I can move it, place it there, and then I'll quickly do a bike. I panicked about this before, thinking, how do you actually draw a bike? Like, what did the... There we go. You get the idea that that's a bike, right? Let myself down there with the bike. There we go. It's a bike. It's a bike. And then we'll finish with a lorry, which should be nice and easy. Right. Block, wheel, wheel, wheel. I'll colour that in. With a green cab. I feel like I've rushed the last two vehicles, but you get the idea. Right, now, so I've got my 4 vehicles. So I'm going to represent these in a data way. Okay, so just using the visual representation, I know that there were only 3 buses, so I'm just going to make the bus small. Okay, I know that there were 5 bikes, so I'm going to make the bikes slightly bigger. Okay, just to represent that. And there were 8 lorries, so again, I'll make that kind of scaled. And then my car, there's lots of cars, so I might make the car a little bit bigger. But what I'm basically doing is just using that data to just represent it in a way that makes a little bit more sense to me. Okay, so the numbers 27, that's a big-ish number, okay, in comparison to the other things. So the car is bigger in relation to those. And then you can start to think about like how you might represent that. So I could just go back into my drawing tools and just put 27 on here. I could put it on the car itself. I could draw that directly onto the lorry. Probably change the colour of that pen so you can see it. So again, you can see how learners can represent that data in a fun, playful way, and it hopefully is going to be more memorable. If we look at the dual coding concepts that we talked about in previous sessions, it's going to be more memorable looking at pictures that I've engaged with, I've drawn myself, I've utilized them, I've created a page where they could sit that represents the data, as opposed to just looking at that data, right? It just makes a huge difference. Now, because I've drawn those pictures as well, I'm just going to go back just to get rid of that writing off of the screens. What I can also do is take that picture, copy it, paste it back onto this, and I can just kind of add that detail to each one of these as well. So again, in a really, really simple way, just copy, paste. Just by adding in that kind of level of detail means that I'm just making a little bit of a theme throughout my work, where it's my picture represented here, the data is then represented. Now mine look very playful, kid-like drawings, although that is my best work. If you're a really good artist, you might do a lot more detailed stuff. You could imagine that if this was doing a survey around different plants, you could take photos of the plants and sketch over them. We've looked at that in previous sessions where you could trace over the things. It just gives context to data. And that's really what we were talking about here. We just want to personalize the data that you're using and then simply use scale to demonstrate size. The section in the book all about infographics goes into a little bit more detail around this in terms of, you can use typography to change things, place on the page, etc. But as an introduction, I just think that, just shows that simple bit of information in a visual pictorial way. So hopefully that's again another kind of really, really useful, simple activity that you can do with learners or do it yourself. Again, I find it quite easy if I'm representing data on something and I go back to my sketchnoting sessions. Size and scale of things are quite easy to show, in a sketch note as well. And so that whole visualization of data thing kind of carries through into other areas. Okay, next thing we're going to move on to then is music. And this is the bit where the cringe factor raises slightly. So I thought about this for different things. There's lots of different things you can do with music. So everyone can create music sessions that, it will teach you about beats. It will teach you about chords and teach you about composition of music. I thought I'd actually focus more on what, at the moment, learners might benefit from, and that is the ability to record their voice. As simple as that. My son was doing an activity yesterday. He was creating a book for another project he's doing. And he wanted to do an interview with Cleopatra. So he came up with some questions that he knew the answer to, but then he didn't want to record his voice as the answer. So he asked his mum to read the answers to the question and put it together as a nice little piece. And I thought, you know what, that's what children can do in the classroom. If they're struggling with an idea for how can they write down all this information, how about not writing it down? How about verbalizing it instead? So I thought a nice thing to do then is create something like a podcast or an interview that you could do. So we're going to look at how GarageBand can kind of support with that as well. So I'm going to go into GarageBand. I'm going to play this first. This is the cringe moment. So hopefully you can hear this as it plays through. And I've just kind of recorded an introduction to a podcast that I might be launching, where I'm going to be interviewing famous people from history. And it's not going to play my sound for me. which is a bit of a pain. So I'm going to work out why that's not playing my sound. Try it one more time. Okay, technical difficulties, but do you know what? It's fine. I know what I said on each of those clips, so we'll go with it. So in the top clip there, I've just introduced the podcast. I think the words just are, hi, welcome to today's podcast live from my front room. Today we're going to be talking to some characters from history that we've been able to interview. First up is our interview with JFK. That's this top bar, okay? What I've then done is I add in a new microphone source. So I tap on the plus, I come up to my audio recorder, I tap on the voice, and you can see I've got like a mini recording studio here, which is great. You can change the settings here. And then you could just simply tap on the record button at the top to record your next part. In my case, I recorded this second section, which is just saying, hi, thanks for joining us today. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself? And then I've added the third section in here, which is me doing an impersonation of JFK, saying, hi, my name is John F. Kennedy, and I was the man who was solely responsible for putting man on the moon in 1969. So that's given me these three sections on the screen. Okay, so I've got this really, really basic interview. Now, for some learners, that might be enough. It's a conversation between themselves and themselves pretending to be someone else. And you can see the three levels there. We've just kind of added in the different elements. All I would need to do to make sure is that on each new recording, I start the line at the end of the previous one so I don't just record over myself. Okay, so that's a key tip. Now, the one thing that I want to do here, though, is if this was an actual podcast or if this was an actual interview that was live on TV or something, it's going to be a bit boring if it's just my voice. So a couple of things that you can do here to enhance it. If I tap on the loops in the top right, so it's the loop that you can see along the top, and you can see that I've got different sound effects, etc., that I can choose. Currently I've got sound effects. I'm going to turn sound effects off. I've got an awful lot of different sound things that I can choose here. Now again, it's a shame that you can't hear my device. I'm not sure why it's not playing through onto the WebEx, but you can see that these are different pieces of music that I can use at different lengths. So 2 bars, 4 bars, 1 bar, 8 bar. And if there's one that I like, I simply tap, drag, and drop. And that's now added that in to my music. Okay, so you can see that I've got this music selected here. Now, I don't really want it to be that long, so I'm going to shrink it slightly. And then I want it to come between my introduction and me then introducing John F. Kennedy. So I just simply move those across to where I want them to be. So I've got my introduction, a little bit of the music, me introducing John F. Kennedy, and then John F. Kennedy speaking. So I'm just layering those different things within my GarageBand project. Now, if I move my timeline, which is this white bar across, if I place that towards the end, this is where John F. Kennedy finishes talking about putting man on the moon. So I'm thinking, let's enhance that a little bit as well. Okay, so I've got me talking, bit of music, me talking, John F. Kennedy talking. If I tap back on those loops and go to genres, you see that I have these sound effects. And some of the sound effects that I have, and I'll show you where you can download these, are actually music from the Apollo moon landings. Okay, so it's actually NASA recordings that they've allowed Apple to put into their devices. You'll see that I've got this one here, it says the Eagle has landed. Again, you can't hear it. I'm just going to tap on that, drag it, and I'm going to drop it at the end here. So at the end of my little project here, I'm going to have John F. Kennedy talking, and then a nice little snippet of the Eagle has landed, which just comes on at the end. Yeah. So a really, really simple way of using GarageBand to record an interview with somebody, a podcast. It could be interviews with parents. I've seen some lovely ideas for this idea of podcast interviews where children might interview grandparents about their experience, if they can remember anything from the war, because it's a great way to then document lots of history and personal history. Yes, we can go online and we can find out about the big things that happened during the war, but sometimes it's those personal things that happened in history that there's that worry that we could lose. So a little project like this where they could interview members of the community, interview their parents, interview the grandparents, those sorts of things, can just add a little extra level. I'm very aware now I'm talking about interviewing grandparents, and like if children are 9, their grandparents probably were not alive during the war. I'm thinking probably more my grandparents were alive during the war. But they could interview them about other things that happened, right? The 70s and all of what happened then. So that's it really for GarageBand. It's a really simple kind of approach to documenting things. Now I'm going to go back a step now because there's one absolutely critical feature that you need to add in when you're recording a podcast. So I'm going to do the whole process from the start, apart from me recording my voice into it. So this is what GarageBand looks like when you first go into it. You're either going to have your queue of recently created folders, or you can browse. It doesn't matter. Either way, you tap on the plus at the top to start a new project. Now, we've got live loops, which are these ones here. This is for creating music or playing around with sound. So we're going to avoid that for now. We're going to go to tracks. And these are all the instruments that you can play with. So again, feel free to like play around with this. It's a lot of fun if you're musical. If you're not musical, it's a lot of noise. But the book will teach you how to be a little bit more musical. I'm going to go to the audio recorder though, because that's all I want to focus on. And I'm going to tap on voice. And it's going to give me this new project. Now, this is the same as you saw before, but the one thing that you really have to remember, along the top bar, where it's got the 1 to 8, there is a plus. You need to tap on that plus, tap on where it says section A, and turn the section length to automatic. Because the preset is that it will record for 8 bars and then it will loop back to the start, because that's what musicians will use in order to create their music. If you do that and you're doing a podcast and you talk for longer than those 8 bars, you'll just start recording over yourself. So turn it to automatic, and that means you can record for like basically an unlimited amount of time. Even once you've recorded your sound, you can play with these equalizers and pitch control and vocal hall, etc. They can add a nice touch to it. And what I did on my recording, which is a shame you can't hear it now, is actually with John F. Kennedy's voice, I turned the vocal hall up a little bit so it sounded different in terms of a background sound to how I sounded. So it did sound like it's someone else in a different place as well. When you're ready to go, you tap on the record at the top, and you just start recording, and you'll see that the red bar starts going across. You know you're recording, and when you're happy with what you've recorded, you tap on the red bar again and you've stopped. Tap stop. Over on the left-hand side, third icon in, is the dots and dashes, looks like Morse code. If you tap on that, it will take you to your project, and this is where we have our recording. Okay, so that's my first line. To have that second line of discussion, so if I now want to add in, the person responding to my question, I'm going to tap on the plus, tap on voice, and then I just do exactly the same process again. The one thing I need to be conscious of is when I start recording, I move my timeline bar to the end of that first person, because otherwise what you'll end up doing is just recording over them talking, and it just gets a bit messy. So if you just place that recording bar at the end, when I now start recording, say whatever it is I'm going to say, blah, 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 blah. And when I go back to that, you'll see that that has just added it as a second recording that doesn't jump over the first one. So again, just a couple of tips really, just to show you how you would structure your recording and everything. So I know I've gone through that fairly quickly, but that's the beauty really of having this recorded, is you can just watch this back as many times as you need to as you're playing around with those things. The idea is a lovely little audio recording podcast of an interview with someone. This way to document things. Okay, moving on to the last one. Now, we've done a full session on video, so I'm not going to get into video for this. There is a whole recording on using iMovie, using clips in order to do this. But just to highlight here that there is a whole book on things that you can do with video in the classroom and beyond. The picture I've got here is about documentary, so getting learners to think about how would they structure a documentary. Here's their learning, but what do I do with it? Do I just write it in a book, or do I turn it into something I can share with someone else? So documentaries, how-to guides, just alternative ways to share that information. So that's it. I think I've got 20 seconds left of my 30 minutes, which is fantastic. I'm right on time. just to finish by saying all of the guides are free to download. They're called Everyone Can Create. You can search on the bookstore, or you can scan the QR code that's on the screen there, and that will take you to the collection of all of the Everyone Can Create guides. Like I said, there's one for music, one for video, one for photography, one for drawing. There's also an early years guide, which is how you can utilize that for really young learners, and a general teacher guide for how you can use it with anybody else. And it gives ideas for how you can use it in history, how you can use it in maths, how you can use it in coding, etc. So if there's no questions from anybody, please do take the recording and share it with other people. Please do get in touch with me. That's me on Twitter if you want to ask anything, or you've probably got my email as well if I've shared this through the university. So thank you very much. Tomorrow's session, 1 o'clock, will be on animation. So if you can make it to that, that would be fantastic. Hope you have a great rest of your day and take care.
Thank you.